Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's event, brought to you by Digital Pulse by ICTC. We're really excited to have you all here today as we discuss cybersecurity in New Brunswick. So today we're going to be looking, based off of the recent report, Searching for Hidden Talent, Expertise in New Brunswick Cybersecurity Community. Really excited to have you all here during the event at any time. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the live chat or in the comments section. And we will address those as we can during the presentation, and we'll also have time at the end to go over any specific questions. So I'm really excited to introduce everyone we have with us here today. We have a panel full of industry experts, and we'll be getting to that shortly. But to kick things off, I'd like to welcome from ICTC, one of the researchers behind the report, Reese.
Thanks so much, Adam. So I'm going to start by walking us through a bit of the study's goals and methodology. Perfect. I'm hoping everyone can see those slides. So the study, Searching for Hidden Talent, Experience and Expertise in New Brunswick Cybersecurity Community, was funded by the New Brunswick Department of Post-Secondary Education, Training and Labor, and wrapped up just in the spring of 2020. Nathan, can I get you to share the next slide? Perfect. Thank you. So as a first question, why study the cybersecurity workforce? And I just want to contextualize this topic with its importance. I'm sure many of you on the call know, cybercrime is a key and growing issue here in Canada. We were rated number 3 in number of data breaches just in 2017. So it's a big issue here. And then the cybersecurity workforce is also kind of a sticky problem in research in terms of there's been an off-cited figure that there's 0% unemployment in cybersecurity. Many employers talk about how difficult it is to find people with the right skills, given how high salaries often are and how much experience people need to be effective. So all of the images on this slide kind of show the plethora of studies that have been done into this topic, right? How to get more people into cybersecurity. And we wanted to add a study that would focus on a specific Canadian region, the province of New Brunswick, because it's well known as an academic hub for cybersecurity in Canada, as my colleague Nathan will talk about later. So in terms of our study goals, we wanted to establish the level and type of demand for cybersecurity personnel in New Brunswick. We wanted to identify the skills needed for those in-demand roles. We wanted to understand any considerations or needs unique to the province of New Brunswick. And we wanted to sketch workforce development pathways. In addition, we really wanted to contribute to the international conversation on this topic because, as I shared on the last slide, there's been a lot of work done on this, so we wanted to deliver findings that would be compatible with other cybersecurity workforce development demand studies. So to do this, we used an American framework called the NICE framework, which stands for the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, out of the US Department of Commerce. And so this framework determines 7 key buckets kind of for cybersecurity roles. And its aim is really to establish a taxonomy that can be used across the world. And many of the people we spoke to in New Brunswick during the course of this study kind of emphasized that this framework was useful for example, seeking international hirers because it meant that because it meant that everyone was using the same language in terms of job descriptions, skills, etc. So this framework was quite encouraged as a way to make sure that everybody was speaking the same language in terms of types of jobs in cybersecurity and in terms of types of skill sets with those jobs. Thanks, perfect. So in terms of our data sources, what we tried to do was map everything that we found during the study to the NICE framework. So we had a few different types of primary research tools. We developed an employer survey for cybersecurity employers in New Brunswick. We held many key informant in-depth interviews with industry experts and employers as well. We looked at job postings, so our data team web scraped from a variety of job boards. And we also took a look at Statistics Canada Labour Force survey data using 5 key national occupation classifications that were identified as cybersecurity related. So with all of these different data types, we mapped them to those 7 categories I showed you on the last slide and tried to see if there were any kind of common trends in which of those NICE categories were the most in demand across the interviews, across the job postings, across the national occupation classifications, and across the employer survey data. So we did I think, find some really interesting patterns and findings, which my colleague's about to talk about. And I also want to add that we did kind of a similar thing for skills. Why we didn't map into the NICE framework, we did rank them across and between all of these different data sources. So if there's anyone on this call who's hoping to develop kind of skill sets in cybersecurity, who's interested in getting into that labor market, you can find that ranking of in-demand skill sets in the report. Great, and so that is a basic overview of our methodology. I'm going to pass it over to friend and colleague Nathan Snyder.
Thanks so much, Fawn. I appreciate it. So yeah, just to start my section, I wanted to talk about and lay a little bit of a context to what and as far as our findings suggest makes New Brunswick obviously an incredibly unique space for the cybersecurity industry to kind of exist. So I just wanted to start my section by highlighting a few of the key findings that we thought really laid that foundation. One of them being Fredericton being identified as one of Canada's 7 academic cybersecurity hubs. So the study really highlights this really interesting post-secondary relationship between the colleges and universities there, and how those educational institutions really created an interesting kind of funnel or supply for the cybersecurity industry. So that touches on a variety of different key skill sets from post-sec, but really just having that type of activity at the post-secondary level really does create a really interesting and healthy foundation. The second one was that it was home to the Canadian Institute for Cybersecurity Research. So the cluster is based out of the University of New Brunswick, and it's focused on cybersecurity training, entrepreneurship, and academia. So there's a lot of boots on the ground work being done there. Everything from academia to actually field research, creating new products, some of which have been purchased by large national and international interest groups to actually be leveraged in the cybersecurity sector. So really interesting on that level as well. What also makes this really unique is the strong investments within the sector and to advocate for both nationally and internationally the creation of jobs as well as business development. So organizations like CyberNB, which is sort of an economic development agency really focused primarily or exclusively rather on the cybersecurity sector there. They've advocated, like I said, nationally and internationally in the sense that they're really trying to bring to light organizations that are based there and bring international interest to the area as well. And they've actually been quite successful in that. And obviously government and local investor funding. So for startups in the cybersecurity sector, there's a really healthy ecosystem that exists there, from everything from learning how to do your early pitches, get your startup off the ground, connecting you with angel investors. Again, a really healthy network between a variety of different levels, both through industry, academia, and government. So I thought this quote was really apt. Dylan Donahue is a representative of CyberNB, and he was mentioning that there's a really nice link between education, industry, and government. But more so, unlike urban centers, which generally or often draw a lot of attention from organizations and even the government in terms of cybersecurity, what's really unique about a place like New Brunswick is that it's easier, as far as Dylan suggested to us, to connect with policymakers and to be able to actually foster relationships at a variety of different levels a lot easier. Obviously, because of the population density, you don't have to compete so much in terms of being able to actually set up meetings and gain the attention of these individuals or stakeholders that you're reaching out to. So because of that sort of unique nature, in terms of being able to really expand business operations, this was a really interesting kind of key piece about the New Brunswick cybersecurity ecosystem. One of the things that we wanted to touch on through our presentation piece here was the report's kind of key findings, one of which being this conversation surrounding a bit of a hiring myth. So often we kept hearing before the report started, and even in the early stages, that because the secondary sector was creating a lot of new opportunities for new grads to get involved in the cybersecurity industry, the demand obviously must be there as well to meet those new grads. So I just want to kind of walk us through a little bit of a narrative here that we've constructed that the report highlights. And that while New Brunswick unemployment in cybersecurity remains low across the board, because it does, certain positions are actually seeing sort of rapid growth. The following positions that I've highlighted just on this slide alone show that in New Brunswick, over the course of a 5-year average annual growth rate, certain key positions are seeing sort of exponential growth, meaning that they're hiring a lot more frequently, and as the years progress, it increases year over year. So one of them, that's sort of linking back to a slide that Fawn was showcasing earlier, was the position under the NICE framework called securely provision. So that involves security analysts, consultants, QA analysts, auditors, and so on. A lot of these positions I'll get into later are very specialized and require potentially additional academic background, field expertise, and those kind of things. And that was with a 15.7% average annual growth. Computer and information systems managers, so that falls under the bucket of oversee and govern. That's managers, so managers of IT, systems op, network design. Again, you sort of start to see this picture where management positions generally, by and large, require a couple years worth of experience. So likewise, certain positions that have really high employment growth or employment numbers are actually starting to see a bit of a drop off in terms of demand year over year. And one of those is the computer network technician. So that's actually seeing a minus 2.1% growth, or I guess decrease. That falls under the bucket of operate and maintain. So that's your network technicians, administrators, positions like that. So I've kind of, in my opinion, cleverly titled this slide, Clearing the Air, Determining High Demand. So it really tries to paint that picture once again. So we can see here that there's a graph on the right-hand side that came out of the job postings that our web or data team ended up web scraping for us. And this shows sort of what high demand for us looks like. So on the right, you can actually see the job board web scrapings that we've created. And we've compared those again to the NICE framework just to, again, create a little bit of a framework for us to wrap our heads around. So when examining the positions of highest urgency, you're going to see securely provision and oversee and govern. Those are the highest frequency of job postings in terms of growth rate, where once again, you see those two positions being the highest demand. But what's really interesting about this is the fact that over the course of the period of time that we were actually doing the web scraping, you're going to see that 20 positions under securely provision were actually posted, with 36% of those roles being filled within 1 month. So if you kind of scroll down that list, you'll see positions like operate and maintain having a 75% filled, I guess, rate, I'll call it, which means that there's quite a discrepancy between those two. So it suggests that securely provision is obviously much more difficult to hire for. Average minimum desired years of experience there, about 6. So that is 6 years worth of field experience. So now we're talking about new grads and sort of relating this back to the previous idea. We're starting to see a bit of a disconnect here that's really interesting. So are new grads really the easy answer? So when comparing these high demand positions, we can actually infer that there's probably a required list of credentials. So I wanted to sort of round this out by diving into one of those. So the answer to this question that we're asking is, well, employers voiced very strongly to us as part of our research for this study that there's a lot of preference for significant being kind of the key term here, work experience. So this is informal, formal training, certifications post-sec, and it's really kind of focusing on the idea of sort of field experience as well. So as far as our employer survey is concerned, we actually ended up getting the feedback, a recruit with relevant work experience being ranked the most important, followed closely by recruits with cybersecurity specific credentials. So I kind of wanted to elaborate on that further. So if the first one is a recruit with relevant work experience and the second one's being cybersecurity specific credentials, we're looking at credentials that were often mentioned in our study, one of them being CISSP, or Certified Information Systems Security Professionals. So what's really interesting about this is if you actually take a look at the requirements for certifications like that, I've actually included verbatim one of the prereqs, you'll see that you need at least 5 years of cumulative paid full-time work experience. So to answer the question, I mean, just based on what we've shown here, really to fill the highest demand positions, we're looking for individuals with at minimum 5 years worth of working experience. So although obviously the new grads being fantastic for a variety of other key positions, the ones that are in most demand right now are the ones that are requiring the position or the experience that is quite difficult to find. So I wanted just to include this here. So experienced talent. So which of the following cybersecurity hiring challenges have you experienced in New Brunswick? So this is the percentage of employers who have experienced challenges. And this comes once again out of our survey responses. So 31% are, like I mentioned, just having trouble finding the skilled talent that they're looking for. Cybersecurity salaries was also referenced as being a little bit of a roadblock or barrier. I thought that was of interesting to share with you guys today. The other one being new graduates lack a career path. a clear career path. So I'm actually going to let the panel speak to that, as they're all industry experts. So Andrew Jeffries, who's actually on our panel today, so I'm fortunate to be able to introduce him later. He shared with us a little bit of an insight in terms of boots on the ground, and that's, we want to build the community here in New Brunswick because we're a part of it. So we need to actually match the recruitment to our growth, and it's difficult to find, attract, and keep skilled talent in the sector, as I've sort of just touched on. So it makes sense to bring in as many channels as we can into that equation. So one of those is looking at the K-12 sector, which they do a fantastic job of, university co-ops and work integrated learning opportunities, and they hire a lot of new immigrants. So we actually did a bit of a deep dive into this as part of the study to take a look at, okay, well, let's look at gender diversity and immigration as being areas for exploration here. You'll actually see by the chart I'm showing you, which is made up of the cybersecurity workforces in New Brunswick. So this again comes out of our employer survey, that the organizations here, 28% of our respondents stated that they're entirely white male identifying. So that's the organization's composition. Second to that, they have a visible minority or first generation Canadian. And then, but that's no women whatsoever in their organizational composition. So that's a pretty clear indicator right there. And the second one being women and first generation Canadians, but no Indigenous people. So we're seeing a bit of a theme here, no Indigenous peoples, few immigrants, and then to couple that, women in tech. So not a new conversation across the tech industry as a whole, as many that are on the call today probably know, but it's really interesting to see that if we're looking for that available data talent pool, this is definitely a key area for future exploration. So to dive a little bit more into the gender equation, so around the world, approximately 11% of the global cybersecurity makeup is occupied by women. So that's 11%. So pretty staggering. And in North America, men are 4 times more likely to hold C-suite or executive level positions, and 9 times more likely to hold management positions. So actually an American study that we referenced as part of this report found that ethnic minorities are well represented in the cybersecurity sector, but or rather less likely to hold senior positions. So again, this is kind of speaking to the management and C-suite level. Women of color were underpaid by an average annual of 10 grand compared to their white colleagues. So in New Brunswick, to add a little bit of a comparison here, women make up a disproportionately small number of cybersecurity related personnel, with even fewer women in managerial roles with higher median salaries, and only 22% of computer and information systems managers actually identified as women in 2015. So I just wanted to set a little bit of a context for you guys today before we jump into our panel discussion, because I think that our report touches on a variety of really key and interesting areas that I encourage you guys to all take a look at by visiting our website or our Medium channel to find out a little bit more. But again, I wanted this to set a bit of a primer for the panel discussion today. So I'm actually going to pass things back off to Adam to take on for us. But yeah, I encourage everyone to take a look when they can at the report. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to both Fawn or myself for more information. Thanks, Adam.
Great. Thank you so much, Nathan. And thank you, Fawn, for providing that overview and kind of leading us into the panel discussion that's going to come now. And, we're going to expand on some of those points. We're going to get to your questions, and we're really going to dive into things. So I'm really excited now. Let's just get into it and introduce our panel today, bringing in industry experts from New Brunswick. So to introduce first, I'd like to welcome Andrew Jeffries. He's a new partner in Deloitte's Atlantic cyber practice. His area of focus is in critical infrastructure protection. Prior to joining Deloitte, Andrew was a founding partner of Bulletproof, an IT services company where he helped to grow the company from its humble beginnings to an Atlantic Canadian success story with over 200 staff around the world. Andrew's passionate about all things cybersecurity and is a geek at heart, but truly enjoys bridging the gap between technical, security, and business. Outside of the office, Andrew enjoys sailing, music, and getting lost in the woods. So welcome, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Adam. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So next up, I'd like to welcome Katherine Cameron. As Chief Operating Officer with Brunswick Security, Katherine Cameron leads the Customer Experience Team, which is dedicated to helping companies develop their cybersecurity culture. Brunswick Security is a SaaS cybersecurity company headquartered in New Brunswick, serving clients worldwide. Brunswick was the first Canadian company accepted to participate in a world-leading cybersecurity accelerator program, Cylon, in London, England, which Katherine led their participation in. Katherine is an expert in organizational behavior, alumni of Venture for Canada, and member of the Wallace McCain Institute. Katherine holds an honors Bachelor of Commerce with a minor in mathematics from Mount Allison University. So welcome, Katherine.
Awesome, thank you, Andrew.
And lastly, I'd like to welcome Jamie Reese. Jamie believes in cybersecurity, not only an industry and profession, but mostly as a provider of value to organizations. As a result, his career has been one of firsts, creating new positions and award-winning programs along the way. He spent his 19 past years in cybersecurity title roles, cultivating organizational cultures, and developing business-enabling security programs in the telecommunications, financial services, government, utility, and occupational health verticals. Jamie shares with the team he has directed the North American CSO 50 Award and the IT Association of Canada Ingenious Award for Technology projects demonstrating outstanding business value. Jamie currently lives and works from the Fredericton, New Brunswick area, responsible for the cybersecurity program in a workplace health and safety authority. Along with his regular work helping organizations understand the value of cybersecurity, he is also a member of the editorial advisory board for the UK-based periodical Cybersecurity, a peer-reviewed journal, and serves as chair on the ICTC National Cybersecurity Leadership Council on Youth and Education. So welcome, Jamie.
That was a mouthful. It's my pleasure to be with you and my two friends on the panel.
Great. So let's just get things started right away. We'll start off, I want to reference a 2018 report by Deloitte Canada that identified Fredericton as one of the country's academic hubs for cybersecurity. And the province is well known for its many cybersecurity-related initiatives. In your opinion, are there unique elements to the province's cybersecurity ecosystem, and what are they? So we'll start things off with Andrew.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I think that New Brunswick has, and Fredericton specifically, has a really good story to tell about cybersecurity. And in fact, when I was pitching myself to Deloitte over the last while before I joined this spring, the Fredericton ecosystem actually played a large role in that pitch, because I understood that there's a real strategic advantage to growing in Fredericton because of the ecosystem that's here, the support of institutions like CyberNB, the government support here is great, the education tie-ins are great, and the ecosystem of companies that we have and the collaboration that happens within those organizations, I think is really key. I think it's, in a larger center, it would be really a lot more difficult to have the same level of collaboration that we have in Fredericton, tight-knit community with a really robust security ecosystem. So I think it's sort of a perfect combination. And I know from Deloitte's perspective, they saw that value, and that's why we're investing in Fredericton ourselves.
Great, thank you for those insights, and it's interesting to hear that perspective that you were kind of presenting to them as well when looking to join. I'll go over to you, Jamie, next. Sure.
Well, I think Andrew hit on a couple of key factors there, and I would just elaborate on those. That smallness of feel, combined with the quality of the people that are here. So I've been very fortunate and been able to travel around a lot during my different jobs that I've had and contracts and whatnot. And I would put the people of New Brunswick toe-to-toe with people from anywhere in the world. And I think the combination of those two things, that kind of coffee shop chat with your security friends vibe with the quality of people, I think is an unbeatable combination.
And Katherine, anything you'd like to add to that point as well there on the ecosystem?
Well, I think Andrew and Jamie definitely hit on a lot of really good points. If anything to build on and add, I'd say just giving some more examples on the collaboration. I think you see a lot of cross-industry collaboration, which they both mentioned. It's a small community. Atlantic Canada as a whole is small. New Brunswick is even smaller. Everybody knows each other, and there's almost this really strong passion to give back and to help each other. And anytime there's an opportunity for two businesses to work together to help each other out, they're taking it and they're finding that. And the government has been phenomenally supportive. You look at provincial, federal government funding that's available, the amount of government organizations that are willing to be early adopters, co-sponsors, really help accelerate some of those or collaborate on some of those cybersecurity opportunities. I think the community is really what has been it stands out to me as one of our prime differentiators and one of the best attributes of New Brunswick.
Great.
We're
Yeah.
really sorry. I was just going to say we are genuinely happy for each other when we see someone else succeed at something. Right? We may be like, oh, I wish I thought of that, but we're genuinely happy that somebody else is making good.
I think that sense of community is really great to hear and see, and I think that supporting each other really helps everyone to grow together and benefit off of each other. So I think that's really good to outline the ecosystem, and we have that. Now things have really drastically changed in the last few months, and when ICTC cybersecurity report was first published prior to COVID-19, it highlighted that 2/3, about 67% of surveyed cybersecurity employers in New Brunswick were looking to expand their workforce, and only 3% anticipated a decrease in the immediate future. Do you think this has changed as a result of the pandemic? And we'll go reverse order here. Go with Katherine first.
Okay. Yes. I would say I think, like any business model, I think any organizations looking at hiring new folks into their team and expanding may have taken a bit of a pause more than anything, just to understand what the pandemic was going to be and the impact it was going to have on their business. What I see now is some of those expansions starting to happen. I think, if anything, the pandemic reinforced more than anything, people need to be connected securely from home. They need to be able to join their work safely. You can't just rely on some of the technical controls that they may have had in the office. Really having a workforce that can get connected remotely and securely, I think has, if anything, proven to be more important than ever at this time.
Yeah, for sure. And Jamie, if you want to add to that.
Oh, well, I think Katherine is exactly right. There was a stutter step early on when everybody just kind of had to figure out what to do, to handle who they had already working for them and how the whole remote thing was going to work. But I see job ads posted now, coming through my social media feeds and whatnot. And there are people changing employers currently in the province. So if there was a starter step, which I think is absolutely true, I think Katherine nailed it. They're picking back up again.
And Andrew, before we hear from you there, I'd like to just maybe add, if you can also touch on this. Katherine kind of mentioned it as well, that maybe there was a pause, but there's a lot of remote work now, and when you can have that secure connection. But has that switch to remote work and the influx of online sales and shopping, has that caused a spike in demand for cybersecurity professionals?
Yeah, absolutely. I think work from home has really put a spotlight on cyber infrastructure generally, and businesses understand a lot more now the importance of that infrastructure. Whereas before, things like being able to work remotely were, an optional nice to have, and we're given that level of importance in the mindset. Today, because everyone's working from home, all that infrastructure has to be rock solid. Every business that you talk to, every organization you talk to, just sees it as a critical piece of their environment. And the number of discussions that are happening right now around enhancing that infrastructure, leveraging some of the new services or newer architectures, cloud environments and such. That's all being sort of forced forward because of people's need to continue business, and people are seeing the value of it. So, our ability to have this conversation today in a pretty cool format, that's, people see that it works, they see that there's value in it, and that there's opportunities to use that going forward. So it's changed IT from sort of the pure cost center kind of that it was before to a more prominent role. And I think people are also seeing from a security perspective that there's risk that's associated with it. There's been already some high-profile attacks that have happened that have been COVID-centered, and so there's that mixture of people seeing the advantage of cyber, but also seeing that there's some risk attached to it. So it's really created a heightened awareness for the importance.
Yeah, I think we've heard a lot before COVID that there's certain technologies that are a thing of the future that's coming, and I think you kind of touched on that there, that COVID has really brought that future to the now and that need for it. And I'm going to go to Katherine next here. I want to stay on this topic. We're talking a bit about that need and that demand for cybersecurity right now. So according to StatsCan 2017 survey of cybersecurity and cybercrime, more than 60% of industry respondents representing real estate, waste management, forestry, fishing, agriculture claim that cybercrime was not a high enough risk to their business to warrant an investment in dedicated cybersecurity staff. What are your thoughts on this, and has this changed?
I think, yeah, a lot of people don't think of the impact of cybersecurity until they go to realize how much is actually connected online and how much they actually rely on their infrastructure. So with those industries in particular, you may not necessarily associate them with digital transformation or leading the line, leading the way in terms of the business transformation. But when you look at the amount of all of their accounting software, all of their clients, all of their business information, all of that is online or in some way accessible from the internet. So I think, and I hope more organizations are starting to realize how valuable the data that they do have is, and how, if they lost everything tomorrow, what the impact to that would be on productivity, on revenue, on their finance. I think a lot of small and medium-sized businesses don't necessarily, or even large ones, don't necessarily realize the impact until they see an example of somebody in their industry on the carnage, I guess, associated with the cybersecurity attack. So I think we're starting to see some transition. You'll see, I guess, a lot of those industries that are typically kind of lagging in terms of technology adoption. I think eventually, hopefully, they'll start seeing the benefits of investing it almost as a preventative, just as they would invest in physical security for their office.
Yeah, that's really insightful. And I'm going to go to Jamie next here if you would like to add to that point as well. Are you seeing similar things?
Yes, certainly. I think often there's a skepticism in businesses, as Katherine pointed out, about the need for cybersecurity. There's also a very real, budgetary crunch, especially in a smaller family-run kind of a place. If it's a family farm, it's not the same as maybe an agricultural giant that has a lot of technology. And so on an individual basis, we may think, that one particular business doesn't really have a whole lot of technology. They don't need it. And that's feeding that sense that it's, across the board, that industry doesn't need it. But as they grow and as they attach more things to more different networks, it's really a given. I think that highlights, though, a gap in small and medium style businesses across the country, across North America, really, on cybersecurity and what they need to do about it. And that there's a whole other talent crunch there, I think.
Yeah, and to kind of go back to that talent aspect, we're talking now more about how even industries that we might not have previously thought of needing cybersecurity, that there is a need, and it's just a matter of, are you going to realize it before or after something goes wrong? And so when we go to that talent, Nathan and Fawn mentioned in their presentation that the ICTC report highlighted experienced personnel were most in demand, with many job postings looking for about 6 years of experience. How do you reconcile the high volume of entry-level candidates entering the New Brunswick market with the need for seasoned experts? And I'll go to Andrew first on this one.
Yeah, I think that's always been a real challenge in our industry, because the cybersecurity is, I think, in particular is very specialized when you get into the individual technologies and concepts. And you have to layer onto that technical specialization an understanding of how it applies to the business. And that whole picture is a difficult one for someone with junior level of experience to necessarily understand or just have the experience to be able to apply properly. So that, I think that's where that comes from. You know, there's certainly opportunities for creating pathways for people to get into the field, and I think that's where it's really important. So, you know, when you see you know, programs like the Cyber Titans, for example, where, you know, people are getting experience. You know, Jamie's the biggest proponent for Cyber Titans that you'll find. I think you're still on the board, aren't you, Jamie, or you still work with them?
Yeah, on that leadership
Yeah.
council, yes.
Yeah, cool. So, you know, programs like that are getting very specific experience in the hands of youth, and then building on that through that program and then into co-op programs. You know, having that pathway, I think, is going to, as long as employers at the far end of the spectrum, when they're consuming them, they understand the value that those programs give, and they should, then I think that's going to help bridge that and make it an easier journey for people coming in, and then otherwise, you know, since there is a gap in the workforce, there's going to be a certain level of employers being forced into lowering the levels that they're going to accept coming in and accommodating. So, you know, the market to some extent will need to resolve that itself.
Yeah, I think that, you know, that's great that you touched on some of those pathways there. I've got my Cyber Titan coin here from this year's competition, and, you know, it's really interesting to hear about some of the different ways to kind of get involved with either, you know, co-ops, work integrated learning, some of those opportunities. And you know, Jamie, I'll go to you next to maybe add to that if there's anything you'd like, but also to share perhaps, you know, new graduates that are looking to enter the cybersecurity industry are finding it difficult to navigate certain, you know, career paths. And is there any advice you would share with these new graduates looking to enter the field and the various paths they could or should take?
Sure. So I'd like to see people. I think this is easier in New Brunswick based on that community aspect that we all talked about earlier on. But I would like to see people like us, like me, be open to high school students, to college students, to university students, whether you want to call it something as formal as mentoring or just having a quick coffee and saying, you know, help them kind of figure out which of these aspects of cybersecurity they like. Because for every facet of technology, there's a matching cybersecurity facet, you know, whether you like databases or web servers or any of these kinds of things. And, you know, helping people just kind of come to grips with all of the available options in that regard is a big deal. And then, I mean, if we start early, and this is something that I've really enjoyed in the last few years, being able to kind of travel around the province and talk to kids in high school tech classes and whatnot. We show them, you know, whatever job you like, whatever thing you're interested in, there's also a cybersecurity related facet to that. So whether it's law, we've seen lots of breaches about, you know, law offices in the last few years. There's a way to mix those two things together. Or you could actually be a lawyer that specializes in security and privacy. There's obviously a growing need for those people. Any major league sports, there's, you know, if you're a giant baseball fan and that's what you really want to work, but maybe you don't have a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, you can still be involved on a professional level helping a team. You know, somebody could go and work for the Blue Jays in that capacity, helping out. And they have data. They collect data on everything. You know, somebody like me, I go down to the race car track that's not too far from my house here in Gary, New Brunswick, and watch the cars go around, and I think, okay, we're just all going around in a oval. But there's literally millions of data points sucked out of those cars to help them understand, how to be better and when to pit and all of that kind of stuff. And that data has so much value. So just talking to kids, and I shouldn't maybe say kids, but young people in general, all of them, whatever age they are, and helping them understand that there's matching their passions to these technologies, and then through the technologies to security as a career is a big deal. And if you can do that for a couple of hours, you could change somebody's life. And I think that's a really big deal.
Yeah, thank you for that. And, I'd like to build off of that, kind of talking about some of the other skills related in some of the areas. But before I go to that, I want to give Katherine a chance if you'd like to share, a piece of advice you'd have for someone looking to find the right pathway into cybersecurity.
I think Jamie hit the nail on the head. There's a pathway for everybody. I mean, regardless of your background, there's a way that you can be involved in cybersecurity and help protect the organization. I think, and just share a bit about, I can use myself as an example. So I started off my career in human resources. And then, you talk about employee engagement and getting people invested in the work that they do. A lot of that directly relates over into cybersecurity and getting people invested in caring about what their role is in cybersecurity. That is something that never, ever occurred to me until I started talking with somebody who was in cybersecurity and convinced me to join them at Beauceron. So had that conversation not taken place, like Jamie just said, completely changed the career trajectory that I was on and what I was passionate about. And it opened up this whole new area of opportunity. I think part of that is, talking to parents as well and educating parents on what career there is available in cybersecurity. I think a lot of people still have kind of, they think it's just kids in hoodies, like banging away on a computer in a dark room. And like that's not an accurate representation of the work that's actually being done in cybersecurity. And there are a lot of really, fantastic career opportunities that people just don't know about. So I think, talking about the breadth, whether you're technical and you really love, problem solving and breaking things and playing with different technologies, or you have a communications background and you're a really strong storyteller, there's ways that your skills can be, applied in cybersecurity.
Yeah, so let's dive into that point a bit more. You're talking about the breadth and range there. So, our study looked at the issue of human skills, often referred to as soft skills, and our research suggested that the industry holds elements of teamwork, interpersonal skills, adaptability, and flexibility as being of the utmost importance. And so these attributes could be applied to almost any position. What makes them so important to cybersecurity? And is there any other attributes you'd add personally to the top of that list? And we'll go back to you, Katherine, there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think cybersecurity is something that is still very abstract to a lot of people, and it's scary. They don't understand it. They don't necessarily understand what's online. So having those soft skills to be able to, take something from very complex and complicated and explain, this is what the impact is going to be, and here's how we can address it, and here are some of the steps to resolve the challenges. I think the communication skills there are really, really important because you're able to, deal with people sometimes on like the worst day of their life, right? They have no idea what's going on. Their email is sending all types of spam to everybody, and they don't understand it. They've never had to deal with that before in their life. So having a certain level of empathy to be able to listen, communicate what's happening, and ultimately work with them to come to a resolution and keep them informed the whole way. I think those are probably some of the most important skill sets in cybersecurity.
Yeah, and Andrew, if you want to add to that as well, anything else you'd put on the top of that list, or what makes them so important?
Yeah, I think it's that bridging the gap of the technology to the business, and to, as Katherine said, to be able to take a situation or a technology that's inherently quite complicated and possibly scary or difficult to understand, and distilling it down into a way that's easily consumable. I think that's really one of the key factors. And even, from a prevention standpoint, when you're trying to justify why someone should be taking some additional security controls, and why they should be spending or allocating money to secure their environment, being able to again translate those concepts into business risk, so that they can be understood. That's a really difficult thing to do, and one that takes a certain nuance and ability and good communication skills to be able to pull off successfully.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like to add, sorry,
go ahead,
just on a combination of those things, on the empathy note that Katherine had, and then just on that kind of translation piece of business, I think it's absolutely right when we're looking outward into the rest of the business that we have to have those. But I'll tell you, those things, when we're looking inward into building a team, incredibly powerful. So I've recently changed positions as well, but in my past employer, I believe we had one of the most effective and diverse teams, certainly in New Brunswick. And I think when Nathan showed his slide earlier of, the different groupings of people, we were in the sum of each category. Not that there wasn't room for improvement, but we were making our way. But the key point there was, it would have been very easy for us all to look across the table at each other and go, here's how we're different from each other. But we had a lot of respect and a lot of empathy, for the people, and we all were in it for the love of the game, so to speak. The game of protecting that enterprise in the security sense. And I think so. We often talk about using those skills outward, but building a team inward is maybe more important in my view.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jamie. I wholeheartedly agree. And one of the things with security is that it touches, you can go very narrow on a lot of topics. So you need to have a team. You need to have a bunch of people that work together and understand the different technologies, because it's difficult for one person to understand all aspects. And being able to collaborate together and bounce things off of other people that might have other expertise, and work on a problem together, I think is key.
Clearly, I think different backgrounds and that diversity adds to that, and having that team, kind of, Jamie, as you mentioned, that has touches on different areas. And so with that, I want to go into that topic of that diversity and inclusion. And from that employer survey, I think Nathan mentioned that earlier, that more than half of the cybersecurity employers who surveyed in New Brunswick reported having no cybersecurity employees who self-identified as being women. What do you think should be done to help encourage an increased level of participation and engagement amongst women in the industry? And we'll go to Katherine first on that.
Yeah, sure. So I think this is always a tough one. I think getting involved from K to 12 I'll use the example of Cyber Titans. I think that's such a great way to get people used to cybersecurity in an approachable way. It gives people an opportunity to play, to experiment, to try new things in a really friendly environment. Whereas, if you don't have those opportunities or those experiences, they'll probably just pick whatever's easiest for you to study in school, or what comes most naturally. You may not be, if you're not exposed to that or see that as a potential viable career for you long term. But I also think there's a lot of people in school that were just not, that they're leaving tech, they're studying computer science, they're studying, or they're going to college for technical diplomas, and they leave the technology community. And I think there's a whole bunch of issues, but some of the things that we can do really well is, making a proactive, I always think it falls a little bit on an employer to make sure that they're, writing jobs that are attracting a wide audience, going out of their way to find out, okay, how do I get in front of this audience? So if we're trying to attract more women, how do I get in front of more women that are qualified for this role? Are there different communities I can tap into? Are there different groups maybe on campus or in high school that we can kind of go and collaborate with, or young professional groups that we can get involved in? So I think there's an awareness piece that employers need to do in terms of promoting new postings and promoting that as an opportunity. Obviously, creating the right environment where people can thrive and succeed, so that, you know, once you attract somebody, they stay. They don't immediately, or they don't leave within 6 to 12 months. That they're seeing their potential to, you know, grow their career, maybe not just in a manager's track, but they also have the ability to grow and develop their technical skill sets if that's of interest as well. So it's almost like a multifaceted issue, but getting in front of people when they're very young, and, you know, exposing them to career opportunities, getting in front of groups that may have the right qualifications that you're looking for, and then creating a culture and an environment where people can thrive and succeed and continue to grow in their career to stay.
Yeah, thank you for those insights there. And you know, Jamie, do you have anything from being involved with some of these initiatives and from the K-12 experience in that? Is there anything you've seen that, you know, you think would be effective as well, or anything you'd like to add to that?
Sure, absolutely, and I think Catherine's right again on the get in front of people early, and certainly we've seen success with young ladies participating in Cyber Titan, for example. However, I still think there's still a gap, and I think Katherine touched on talking to the parents earlier. Not only is it to make sure parents understand that cybersecurity is a viable career opportunity for their children, but it's for all of their children, right? I still, when I show up at a tech class, it's still by far the vast majority of the people attending are males. And so if they're not in the class for when somebody like me shows up and spouts off about how wonderful cybersecurity is, they're not going to get that message from me. It's an important thing, but I think there's some other ways that, you know, actually I saw CyberMB before all of this pandemic stuff was going on. We're showing ads in movie theaters about different paths into technology and whatnot in the province, and of course showing with a diversity of people on the screen, showing that everyone belonged. That messaging is important, and there's no doubt about it. People have to be able to see that, you know, oh yeah, I could do that. There's somebody like me.
Yeah, that's great. And that's really interesting to hear about that kind of type of marketing and really showing that to people. And kind of staying on that topic of diversity, the presentation also suggested earlier that opportunities available for experienced international hires remains optimistic. However, concern exists around the lack of clear pathways for employment. Do you have any thoughts or recommendations on how these pathways could and should be developed when it comes to internationally experienced individuals? And I'll go to Andrew on that first.
Yeah, I mean, my own experience, both at Bulletproof and now at Deloitte, has been very positive with hiring internationally. I mean, now that I'm at Deloitte, you know, we are a global company, and it's sort of ingrained into the culture of the organization. And but I think hiring internationally, the same as with gender parity, you need to really be just intentional about doing it. You need to intentionally be seeking out people in those different new immigrants coming in, people that are coming in under programs, using the programs that are available, and just really, sometimes it takes a bit more effort to look down all the different pathways that are available to try to improve your diversity, but you need to do it. It's just the right thing to do. So, you know, depending on the specifics of the security position, there might be some limitations from someone that's a new immigrant for things like security clearances, for example, depending on the position. But there certainly there's no shortage of positions that could be leveraged that would be open. So I think it really is all around just intentionality. You know, there's no shortage of government programs that are available. CyberNB and ONB are doing a great job recruiting, and it's a matter of really just intentionally doing it.
And that's in the control of organizations. So for example, my past employer, we built a new job entry point. We called it cybersecurity internship, but I mean, it was fully paid, far above minimum wage. You got all the health benefits and the pension starting and all those things. It wasn't a, a way to try to cheat people, get people to work for free or anything. But we built it in such a way that we could take people in and measure their soft skills that we talked about already, measure their tech background wherever it came from. So perhaps they didn't have a Canadian credential, but they had spent 10 years working in the field somewhere else, and we did that because, of course, in that particular organization, there was a lot of job bans already established, and it's very kind of stringent hiring thing and all that. We just tackled it in a way, and the HR people loved it. They absolutely loved the idea that we were going to kind of bend on some of their pre-made processes and kind of break things up a little bit. So once we went to them with the idea, they were all for it. But I don't take credit too much for the thing, because all I did was kind of bump my head and think of it one day, and then everybody else kind of ran with it. But it was that's all it really took. So sometimes it's, as easy as going and starting a conversation in the cafeteria, which is exactly how I started that particular program. And we ended up with people from all walks of life and 50-50 on origin, whether they were from Canada or not. So it worked. And not all just because of that program, but in a large part.
Yeah. And you briefly mentioned there, both you and Andrew briefly mentioned a bit about the kind of credentials and looking at that. And our employer survey saw that cybersecurity experts in New Brunswick held more value in an applicant's relevant work experience than recruits with computer science, engineering, or business credentials. Why is there such a high importance placed on experience over academic credentials when it comes to cybersecurity? And Katherine, I'll go to you first there.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot about cybersecurity is you'll find in industry. Some of the most advanced cybersecurity professionals don't necessarily have a university degree or a college diploma. They've spent so much time playing and tinkering, and they're self-taught. They've learned things themselves, and a lot of the credentials that are so popular and I'd say, well recognized internationally, really have helped a lot of folks who may not, want to commit to a four-year degree once they've already been working out of school for quite some time, to get a credential over time and recognize all of their experience. So I think both Jamie and Andrew can probably speak to this one a little bit better than I can, but I think some of the most advanced people that I've met certainly have not followed traditional career paths.
And Andrew, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I'm a theater grad, so that's probably a good case study in that. No, I think Katherine, you hit the nail on the head where, I think the tradition of security has been one where it's been people that have been just passionate about the technology and passionate about the subject, and there's a lot of self-learning that goes along with that, and traditionally, up until recent years, there hasn't been a really strong education mechanism for security. There haven't been a lot of programs in universities or colleges. That's changing a lot. Right now, there are some great programs that are feeding the system, but up until very recently, that wasn't the case. So I think there is a bit of a mindset within the security community where you can just figure it out. You can do it yourself, because a lot of us were just self-taught. So that I think we inherently sort of believe that people can sort of bootstrap themselves and figure it out. The certifications, whether it's CISSP or the SAN certifications, are a very good shorthand way of communicating to an employer that you know what you're doing. So it's something that someone with a fairly low expense and investment in time can prove that they have the abilities that the employers are looking for. So I think that's why they're so frequently leveraged.
Yeah. And Jamie, anything you want to add there as well?
Yeah, I 100% agree with the thinking of it's in a lot of ways an historic artifact of the way that colleges and universities taught computer science in the past, with very little emphasis on applied security, and that is changing. It's changing a lot, thanks to people in New Brunswick showing up and working with those different organizations to help them build new curriculums and whatnot. So it's been wonderful to see that happening. So I think that'll change in coming hiring. We'll start to see, college diplomas and university diplomas that are more aligned with that. I don't think we have it all figured out. And I think large organizations in particular kind of get stuck on we always want a 4-year degree, or we always want something, some special thing. And I think sometimes you just have to show up and step on some toes and, make a little noise, and you can get around that a little bit. But it's tough. And, some organizations are more stuck in their ways than others. So
Yeah, and so I just want to bring up a question we got here from the audience, and it kind of just ties into what you mentioned there. But basically, earlier in the presentation, we mentioned a bit about University of New Brunswick, and so here's the question. I'm just going to pop that up on the screen. But is there more value to employers on certain programs when it comes? We've talked a bit here about the different pathways. We talked a bit about experience being important. Where do the programs weigh out? Is it different to each employer, or is it going to be more about how you shape yourself in the application process? And Katherine, I see you nodding there. Do you want to take that first?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all higher education has value depending on what type of role you're looking for. So I think a degree, a diploma, to me, they share a lot of the same, like you're learning a lot of the same. It's about the knowledge that you learn while you're there in school, more so than kind of the piece of paper at the end of the day, at least from my perspective. For context, I work in a small technology company, so we are probably way more flexible in terms of, requirements. We don't require a 4-year degree for any position. I think there's value no matter what, and it's ultimately it's about the skill sets that you can come out and demonstrate.
Yeah, and I'd love to see the comparison there. Andrew, what do you see with Deloitte being a bigger international organization?
It really comes down to the position that's being hired for. I think there are some positions that are more suited towards sort of a research or sort of a strict development sort of area where I think the university credentials are important. But I think it's hard to beat a college program for practicality and applicability right out of school. My previous employer, I certainly I know that I hired more college graduates than university graduates just because of the immediate applicability of their skill set. But it does depend a lot on what you're doing. Like, say, if you're doing something that's heavy into the development or research or reverse engineering, or some of those some of those areas where you need to have a lot more knowledge of system development and those sorts of areas, then I think that's where university shines. But I would not hesitate to steer someone towards the college avenue. There's some great programs that are coming up locally. NBCC was one that was mentioned. That's a great program. So I certainly wouldn't hesitate.
Yeah, and Jamie, I'll let you add to that, but I just also, if you can touch on another question we kind of got in here, and we'll pass this around after, is there any advice you'd give to someone who may not have the financial resources to study cybersecurity as well? And Jamie, I'll let you touch on that first.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an incredibly important one. So I'll get to that real quick. I just wanted to add, I often think about this as when we go and build an office building, we need an architect and a planner, and we need the interior designer, and we need the glazier to make the windows, and we need the plumber, and we need the electrician, and we need cabinet makers and all that stuff. Those are all varying levels of education that comes together to make that a building that people can go and occupy. A security program is exactly the same way. You need people of all of those various talents, as Andrew pointed out, kind of an architect position versus a hands-on. My first tech job was pulling cable, actually crimping Cat5 cable, or actually before that was coaxial cable and then Cat5 cable, and pulling it through ceilings. Like those jobs are all needed, and you find those hands-on opportunities either by kind of luck, which was my first shot, or by taking courses. And I've like Andrew hired many more people from the MBCC college level than from university levels. And I think, with apologies to my friends at the university level, I think I've recommended more people to the MBCC and the CCMB courses as a way to kind of keep the costs down and get some hands-on applied school and be able to get into the workforce quicker, because it's usually a much shorter program depending on which one you go to. On the notion of getting training and equipment and things into people's hands that can't afford it. This is a personal thing for me, because I grew up in the north end of St. John. I'm a single mom. If you're my age, you'll remember the thing called the ABC after school special, right? It was always about kind of a down and out kid that made good. That's literally, I call that my ABC school special story, because I had all of the things that should have been kind of holding me back. And what changed that was a couple of really good high school teachers, and the fact that my mother somehow scrimped and saved and bought me a Commodore 64. And those things changed my life. And a Commodore 64 is a lot of money, right? I think it was $800 back in the 80s. There's a lot of money. Nowadays we have things like Raspberry Pis and other types of equipment that we can get out. And I really think we need to start. There's great things like Computer for Schools that are focused on getting equipment in the classrooms. Again, I think it's incumbent on people like us, like myself in particular, to make sure that youth from those maybe statistically impoverished neighborhoods or postal codes, or however we're going to kind of look it up in the stats charts, get those opportunities. And actually, I see our government just announced yesterday, I think, with the pushing out kind of remote schooling for when everybody goes back to school this year, that they have a means tested way of helping people acquire laptops and other things that they're going to be able to get to help people take part in their basic schooling, let alone the cybersecurity stuff. The other things is, I've been known to buy people stuff. They want a cyber A course or a Udemy course or those kinds of things. I just do it because it's such a small amount of outlay that it really can make a difference. And that's a charitable notion, I guess, but I think it's an important thing for us all to do, to look back and make sure that we're kind of putting that ladder down and helping people up behind us.
I think just that mentality there kind of goes back to what you were all saying at the beginning about what that ecosystem is like in New Brunswick, and really having that sense of community. And that's, I think a great example of really what is there in New Brunswick to be offered. And, we're talking. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think we've been, that kid in Chipman or that kid in Bucktouche, that can't, there's no big computer lab in their school, or there's no, money in their household for whatever reason. And it's not I mean, it does make me feel good. I'm not going to lie about that, I guess. But it's not for me that we do this. If we can see that the more people that we help, the stronger the ecosystem is, the better off we all are. And, I think that's just astoundingly important to us as a province to make sure, I moved away like a lot of people did, and I came back. I don't want for my kids to have to move away. I would prefer that they get to stay here and work, and I would like for everybody's kids to get to stay here and work. Again, being genuinely happy about seeing other people do well is a maritime thing. I think it's certainly a New Brunswick thing.
Yeah. Well, just on that note of people staying and being happy, we've talked a lot about talent, and there's a lot of conversation around organizational loyalty, retention of highly skilled staff, not just in the cybersecurity industry, but in the tech industry as a whole. So what recommendation would you make to other industry leaders on how best to retain talent? And we'll start with Andrew on that one.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to ask that question since I just moved, I guess. But no, I think first of all, employers do need to understand that that there is always going to be some movement of people. People do just naturally want to try different things, and I think that's normal and okay. But if you're trying to retain people, I think there's a few key things. One is that you have to keep them engaged. You have to support them. I think there is in a lot of positions there's the tendency that rather than promoting within, that you bring someone else new for a position, and you have to, as an employer, you really have to always be looking at your team and seeing how you can support them in the growth of their career so that you can keep them engaged, and giving them the resources so that they can stay engaged. Especially I think when you're looking at people that are more junior in the field, it can be a challenge because they're coming in, maybe right out of school at a junior salary level, and you're building up their experience, and you have to be very tactical about how you progress them and when you progress them, because there's clip points that you get to where they're going to be interesting to other employers, and if you're not matching what the outside world would give that person with from their experience level and education level and ambition, then you're going to lose them. So it's a difficult thing to do. It's very fine balance, but you need to pay close attention to where people are progressing and how that relates to the outside world. If you were looking to hire someone like them, what would you pay them? What sort of duties would you give them? Because again, it's difficult if you have someone right out of school. Maybe they've been with you for 8 months. You haven't even gotten to the year yet. Why are they looking for a raise? Well, they're looking for a raise because of 8 months into a position down the road, someone's going to give them a better salary, and for them that's important. So you have to be able to be flexible and accommodating to and really take reality of the demand into account as well, because skilled people that are good and ambitious are in high demand, and if you don't treat them like gold and foster them, then you're going to lose them.
Yeah, and Jamie, I'll go to you there if you have anything you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, and I think the outside world comment was a really key one. I don't just compete for talent against Andrew and Katherine, and Fredericton doesn't just compete against St. John. We're competing against Toronto and the tech behemoths to the south of us. Really, we can get away with some discrepancy, and we can say it was a market rate minus whatever percent and all those kinds of things. But really, truly, I think the pandemic is showing this. We can do this kind of work pretty much from anywhere. And if, somebody in Toronto or Boston or whatnot is going to offer people that work for me 2 times as much money, but they can still stay here and work in New Brunswick and do it remotely, we're going to have to start thinking differently about what attracts and retains talent. I personally stay in New Brunswick, and because it's home, and it's a different kind of a lifestyle, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. Some people want to be in the middle of a giant city. I get that. You're not going to be able to keep those people no matter what. But you can play up the good parts of where you are, and then you have to realize to some degree you're competing with all of them. And you may not be able to go head to head on salaries, but you can offer other things to make it better. And then on the engagement point, security like no other requires people to be constantly doing training and upgrading of skills. And if you're not offering it, somebody else is.
Absolutely. And Katherine, anything you'd like to add to that point as well?
I'd say one thing that we've done recently that it only launched about 2 months ago, so I'll keep everyone posted on how successful it is long term. But we actually created a progression framework and shared it with our employees, and created 2 different tracks of progressing in your career. So giving people a clear view of how they could grow, their technical or individual skills, and showing a way for them to progress their career over time without necessarily having to manage people in order to continue to, improve and move up within the organization. So I think that was really, really well received from our team for a couple of reasons. One, we're relatively small and there's only going to be a handful of managers. So if someone gets passed over for a promotion, they may start looking elsewhere, but we wanted to give people a way of saying, we value you and we want you to continue to build and develop these really great skill sets that you have. So whether it's technical, whether it's, sales, marketing, whatever department they're within, it kind of used one framework for people to continue to grow and develop. And when you've got a team like Andrew and Jamie both said, when you have a team of high performers, they're hungry to see how they can continue to grow. And I think, reviewing that every 3 to 6 months as to what level they're in and what they're doing to continue to grow and their performance is going to be really important for us, keeping people engaged and seeing how they can continue to develop themselves. So that's something that we're doing, outside of the obvious salary, compensation, employee stock options, all those other types of benefits that we can offer.
Yeah, that's
down
really...
with doing performance reviews once a year and forgetting about it the rest of the time.
Well, those are some really interesting insights there. And before we wrap up, I just want to bring back Nathan and Fawn here, the researchers kind of on this report, and let the audience know that if there are any questions for either Fawn, Nathan, or the panel, now would be the time to put them in if we haven't addressed them in the comments there. And while we're waiting on any last questions there, I want to go back to the panel with a final question, a bit of an aside from the talent conversation we've had, but with everything going on right now. Is there a single best practice or piece of advice that you want to give to people watching about good cyber hygiene during COVID-19? And we'll just go in order here, start off with Andrew.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I would tell people to consider is you now have a whole bunch of people working from home, and in a lot of cases you have a lot of data sitting in people's houses and on people's personal systems, and there's been a lot of let's say leeway in the application of security policy since COVID happened. So you have a lot of people treating data in ways that you wouldn't have done 6 months ago. So I think it's important not to lose sight of that, and that you really give consideration to how people are working and how you can stay secure in that home environment, in the physical location, using, if it's using their own devices, obviously there's even more considerations there. So so I think that's the point I'd like to drive.
And we'll go to Katherine next.
I would always say 2-factor authentication. Turn that on for any account that you have. That's usually the piece of advice I try to give to friends and family, and show them how to activate it on their different accounts, whether it's social media, email, banking. I think that's a really good one that individuals and organizations can implement that will significantly reduce their risk. and oftentimes it's free or of no cost, or you're already paying for it. So turn that on as soon as possible.
Yeah. And Jamie?
I like the technical answers, but I'm going to add a little twist. This is a very stressful time. You know, we're all working at home. We have kids and pets underfoot, and we have maybe elderly parents that we're worried about, maybe in different cities, and until recently, and in some places across the country still, we can't go visit them. It's trying and it's hard. And when people are under conditions like that, trying to get their work done, they are apt to make mistakes. It's a given because of all of the things that are on their mind. I would encourage us to go easy on people when they make mistakes in this situation. We want to still encourage them to be reporting to us and to work with us. And if you go off on them like Armageddon, they're never going to call you again. And I think that's a really key thing that we have to remember, that we're here to support them to get their work done. And I would like for everybody to do the 2 technical things and then remember we're all just people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, with everything going on, everything's amplified, and really appreciate that advice. I definitely need to set up some 2-factor authentication on a few more of my personal devices, and I will not be sending iTunes gift cards to anyone when I get those emails. But, you know, I think there's been a spike, and there's been some uptake in this, and so I really appreciate the insights, the advice, and, you know, the whole overall picture on what New Brunswick and cybersecurity has to offer. I really want to also take a chance to take a shout out to Fawn and Nathan for providing that overview and insights on the research, and I just, you know, give Nathan a chance here if you'd like to add anything about the work and the research that was done in the report that went into this.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm actually just going to start by thanking each of the panelists. So for those that are on the call, all 3 have been strong supporters of the research and the study right from day one. So I just want to start by kind of thanking you for your support basically the entire time that the study has been taking place. Obviously couldn't do it without you, especially today, volunteering your time. A few other thank yous that I just want to put out. Our colleague Chris helped conduct this study as well. He's not on the call today, but he was a strong supporter of all the academic research that went into the study. We had a fantastic advisory committee that met numerous times over the course of this study, and the list is very long. So I just want to kind of broad or blanket sweep and just say thank you to each and every one of them for their participation. And for our strong research team and ICTC as a whole. We have directors, senior directors, Lexi, for instance, who's another strong supporter of the research, putting her effort together to help it come off. And then lastly, and most importantly, obviously, to our provincial funder, PEDAL, or the Department of Post-Secondary Education, Training and Labor, for allowing us to do this research. So thank you all the way around, I guess. And thank you, Adam, for moderating today.
Absolutely. We're getting, you know, lots of comments, and people enjoyed this, and with the questions we got. If we had any that we didn't get to, or you'd like more information, Nathan's provided some of that earlier contact information in this, but we'll also be reaching out to you following up. A recording of this will be made available as well if you'd like to reference anything, and we will be providing you with all the information that you may need. So again, big thank you to our speakers for joining us. Thank you to Nathan and Fawn for providing those insights. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. We look forward to more conversations with you, and be sure to stay up to date with all of our upcoming Digital Pulse webinars. So thank you everyone for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.